All right, folks, let's get started. I'd like to try and get out of here in 2 hours. We have I guess 9 items on the agenda to jam through here. So welcome to the December meeting of the State Water Commission. MJ, can you call the roll?
Senator Serville?
Here.
Senator Marsden? Senator Stewart?
Here.
Senator Perry?
Here.
Senator DeSteff?
Here.
Delegate Lopez?
Here.
Delegate Bulova?
Here.
Delegate Hodges?
Here.
Delegate Krizik?
Here.
Delegate Rasool? Delegate Tran?
Here.
Delegate Clark? Delegate Laufer? Lamont Curtis?
Here.
Brian Bayford?
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, MJ. Okay, first thing we have on the agenda, I think, is the proposed budget amendment for SWIFT. Those of you who were on the commission last year might remember we adopted something similar to this last year. It appeared in the Senate budget, did not make it in the House budget, though. This one is a little bit different from last year because it has the second piece about the DEQ wells. But we also discussed this at the last meeting where we didn't have quorum. But basically, we've received multiple presentations, I think, now over the last 4 years about the SWIFT program in Virginia Beach and how successful it's been. Initially, we were waiting to see if it worked, and DEQ, everything has shown us, said that it does work. It's working wonderfully to recharge the aquifer down there. The first part of this amendment would have a study to figure out what other locations within the Eastern Groundwater Management Area that a SWIFT program or SWIFT type program could be deployed. And then the second piece of the amendment would provide $2 million to DEQ for them to drill test wells north of Fredericksburg to figure out the modeling for that portion of the Eastern Groundwater Management Area. They presented to us, I think, it was the last meeting, the meeting before, that they have insufficient data in order to be able to figure out how the aquifer works up there, and they would like to figure that out. So that's what the amendment does. Is there any discussion about the amendment? No discussion? All right, is there a motion that we approve it?
So
recommend
moved.
it? It's been moved and seconded that we, I guess, approve or recommend this budget amendment for this year's budget. All those in favor? Do we have to take a recorded vote, MJ? Okay. Everybody that supports, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, you show that it'll pass unanimously. Great, thank you. Next up, we have legislation from Delegate Campbell, which we heard at our first meeting in June. I think reheard it again in the meeting we had. We heard her version in June, got a presentation then we heard a revised version that I guess staff had drafted based on our comments for the last meeting where we didn't have quorum. And now you have two things in front of you. I'll tell the commission. Number one is you have the version that was drafted by DLS based on our discussion last meeting. Just so refresh the second version I'll get to in a second, but just so the commission recalls where we are, Delegate Campbell had proposed to create a fund to allow homeowners to seek money from the state to stick things on their faucets to get PFAS and stuff out of their water. And we had expressed concern about if it was something that was detachable, whether that was something we'd want to fund because of, I had concerns about fraud. People could take it and put the thing on eBay or something like that if the state got it or whatever. But I thought it ought to be something more permanent. In any event, this version basically does that. It basically says that homeowners can apply for the state to reimburse for equipment to be attached to your water system, permanently attached to your water system at home. Subsequent to us posting this online on, I don't know, Thursday or Friday last week, something like that, the Water Quality Association reached out to us and gave me some revisions, which are the other version you have in front of you, which looks more like a Word document. It says supervision by the board at the top. And they have a couple revisions. They proposed that the equipment needs to be installed by a qualified third-party professional, that the equipment needs to be certified by certain entities, and that the homeowner ought to demonstrate contamination. So those are some changes they've suggested. Delegate Campbell, welcome back.
Thank you.
What would you like to tell us?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me again. I know that you've heard about this more than one time, so I'm going to keep my comments fairly short for you. Essentially, we carried this in 2024, asked that it be carried over to 2025 because of lack of funding. And since then, we've worked together with some of the stakeholders, and I think that we have perfected this piece of legislation in a manner that will really do what we set out to do from the very beginning. This bill would require the Board of Health to create regulations for point of use and point of entry drinking water supplies. It would also establish a fund by the Office of Drinking Water to first test and then to treat contaminated water supplies for people using private wells. With the changes that we've made, we went back and we've limited the program to private wells, and we have specifically targeted those that have an economic need as defined in the language. Now, this is important really for the entire Commonwealth, and while I do believe, unfortunately, wherever we look, we will find contamination in our water, it's a step in the right direction so that we can start to rectify the situation. That's really pretty much the gist of it. There have been some different recommendations that came in terms of a third-party certification body, which would be a professional that would oversee the process to make sure that the testing was done properly. And again, as Chairman Serval said, I think these are great recommendations.
Great. Delegate, you're okay with the proposed amendments that the association gave
Yes,
us?
I am.
Okay, I think Delegate Lopez has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quickly on the Microsoft Word version, Section 2 in the red section, where it says the severity of the drinking water contamination. How would that be determined specifically? And then also, when it goes little to the economic need of the private residential owner, what would the threshold be for economic need? And then, so, I'm just worried that, especially with the severity of the drinking water contamination, that someone's not going to know whether or not they have a drinking water problem, and they could go years, decades without actually addressing the fact that they have significant lead or millions of parts per billion, or thousands or hundreds of parts per billion more above the safe threshold levels. And so is there anything that we would do, or you would do, or we could suggest or work together on to clarify that and make it a little bit more clean?
Thank you for that question. So, again, this would set up a board that would create the regulations that would apply to the point of use. And so they're going to set the standards for this because we know, again, like you said, to your point, that there are lots of contaminants in our water system right now that people are going without knowing about. There are no regulations right now that for people that are on private wells that actually enforce this testing. And so this is where we're trying to get with that, to your point. We're trying to get to a point where we have standards set up and that testing is, applied consistently. The issue is that when the testing occurs and we find the contaminants, there are people that cannot afford to fix the problem. So that's why we have set up, and if you look at the language in the bill, it specifically shows what the economic need threshold would be for them to be able to meet that need. Again, I'm with you. I wish that we could do this across the board and that we wouldn't have to look at economic need because I think it's important for everyone to be able to have safe, clean drinking water.
So much of this is addressed.
Delegate Lopez.
Mr. Chairman, so much of this is addressed in B1?
Yeah,
Yes.
Delegate, I think it would be in the guidelines that the department has to set forward on the grants, subsection B1,
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much, I appreciate it.
unless we tell them what they are, yeah. Okay, are there any other questions? My queue is working. D-Steph, are you in the queue? Or is that we testing it still?
That's me.
Okay.
So I heard a little bit about how you're going to define the severity of the drinking water. Can you go into some more fidelity on that? And also on the, I'm going to use your term, how do you define economic need? If you can go into more fidelity on that, I'm not real clear on this. And then when we get to the point where you're talking about it has to be a qualified qualified water treatment professional install this. I mean, I don't see that as one of the DPOR licenses. How are we qualifying that? Is that any contractor, any certified contractor? Is that anyone from Home Depot, from Lowe's? Help me out there.
Senator, first of all, I think B1 says that the Department of Office of Drinking Water, the department have to establish guidelines, and they'd have to come up with the guidelines relating to application and award, which would include the severity of the contamination and the economic needs. So unless we gave them statutory guidance, they'd have to figure that out. And I assume they would figure it out based on the amount of money. In terms of your other question, I'm not sure if
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
Senator DeStuff, Economic need is defined in the statute,
Oh, it is?
32.1, 248.5, Section A. Economic need is given a very specific definition, and it references another section.
Oh, good point.
Thank you.
First page.
It's on page 2, I think, of the printout. It was your packet.
Yeah, on the red line, it's on page 2. On the Word doc, it's on page 1. Yeah. Yeah, and the third-party professional is defined in the red line version on page 2.
Mr. Chairman, if I can follow up, again, that's very subjective.
A certification is subjective?
No, it says a private residential well owner is low income as defined in 2.2-234, or the private residential well owner would otherwise be unable to pay or have significant difficulty paying for an eligible treatment or filtration system. Filtration systems they can cost anywhere from what a Brita system would cost up to $10,000 or $20,000. And on a private well system, I just put one in. I just paid $7,000 for a filtration system. So, there's a huge difference here. And, we're just saying, well, they could have significant difficulty paying for it. Well, I didn't want to pay $7,000 for it. What's a significant difficulty? It's very subjective.
Yeah, I think the department has to figure that out with their guidelines, Senator. I mean, that's the idea. They'd have to demonstrate it somehow.
And then back on the installation, who are we saying, since DPOR doesn't have a certified water installation category, who are we saying is certified? Can it be somebody who goes through 2 hours of training, 4 hours of training, 12 hours of training? Can it be just your general contractor who comes in, a Home
Is Miss O'Malley here?
Depot or Lowe's?
Or is she online? Paige O'Malley, who gave me said she was going to be here. Do we have anybody online?
Yes, sir. There's an Ashley and an Olivia Simelich.
Not a Paige O'Malley? No? Okay. She told me she was going to be here. Senator, the way it was described to me this morning was that there's professional certifications for installers of licensed water treatment products. And you see this also applies to anybody who's a licensed plumber, well water provider, individual holds a license or certification relating to well water treatment. So you'd have to, a license or a certification is a objective documented standard. I think the concern they articulated to me was that there shouldn't be handymen installing these things. They should be licensed professionals messing with people's water systems. That's in the red line version. You see that? Delegate Bulva, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know if it's so much as a question, and I don't know that it would preclude us from acting on this today, but I do have some concerns that we need to think a little bit more through the qualified third-party professional part. And I guess what gives me a little bit of pause, is that you're credentialed through a manufacturer or you're credentialed through a third-party association. I know sometimes we spell out what those associations are, but to me, I'm not sure that I'd want to hang my hat on allowing a certification program put together by a manufacturer de facto be allowed to be the third-party professional, since these are ors, so it's not ands. And so, if you're credentialed through a manufacturer, you automatically have the right to be able to do this. And so that's just something that I would want to tighten up. I think that gets to what Senator DeStef was talking about. Again, not something that's insurmountable, but I think we just need to be careful with respect to ensuring that state dollars will be applied correctly and that the filtration system will work properly.
If we just combined 1 and 2 on the qualified professional piece and said it had to be a plumber, well provider, a licensed plumber, well water provider, or licensed individual that also has this private credential?
You mean just getting rid of, Mr. Chairman, I guess eliminating number 1 and just beefing up number 2? So that you've got a state license.
Combining 1 and 2.
Yeah, probably. You'd need to wordsmith it, but I think we could do that.
Anissa? You got that? Is that something you think you could do?
Mr. Chairman, yes, if I understand, just omitting the Romanet 1 under that definition and then just kind of combining 2 and 3 and revising it.
No, combining 1 and 2.
Oh, 1 and 2.
I'm not sure 3 is even all that necessary, to be honest. I mean, but
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I would suggest eliminating number 3, because if you've got a whole company and they've got 1,000 employees and they got one individual who's certified, technically they can have anybody go out there and install this. So I think it needs to actually be the licensed person on the job.
okay. So, Anissa, a licensed plumber or are well water providers licensed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You just want to go with 2?
Yeah,
What do y'all think we just go with 2?
I think so.
What about our 2 water professionals here? Bud and, yeah, Mr. I always forget.
Bayford.
Mr. Bayford.
Yeah, in 45 years of testing water and putting in water filtration systems in the state of Virginia, the variables are huge, from companies that will charge $7,000 and a company with just as much expertise, if not more, sometimes will put in the exact same quality of system for less than half of that. So there's a lot of, I'm sorry, there's a lot of potential for issues within which companies are approved to do this. But as far as state licensing, you know, I had a contractor Class A license. I had a Board of Waterworks license. I also was on the board for the Eastern Water Quality Association. So I had a lot of expertise in doing what I'm doing, or doing what I was doing. But I think this opens up a lot of questions as to, I'm not sure why it's doing that. It opens up a lot of questions as to, it doesn't want me to talk, as to who should be doing these installations, for sure. State Board of Waterworks is very important. That should be a certification that they have.
Okay, so it sounds to me like what this needs to say is a licensed plumber, licensed well water provider, or individual holds a license relating to water treatment issued by a state. I don't think there are any local licenses. I think we just need to strike issued by a state or local government. It's just a licensed plumber, licensed well water provider, or individual holds a license relating to water treatment.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion about that? Striking 3 and 1? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? No. Okay. Any other discussion about the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I move we support or endorse.
Oh, wait,
the
Hodges,
bill's
I'm sorry.
amendment.
Sorry. Okay, it's been moved that we, and I see Hodges wants to speak too. We have a motion to endorse or approve it. Is there a second to that?
Second.
It's been seconded. Delegate Hodges, you had something you want to say?
Just had a quick question, Mr. Chairman. On line 59, it says, subject to the availability of funds, any grant awards for private residential wells shall require an applicant demonstrate the severity of drinking water contamination. So, I mean, should the applicant really do that, or should that be coming from the Office of Drinking Water? Just in the language, I'm just wondering, should that be the responsibility of the applicant to do that, or where should that come from?
Doug Campbell, I think you had an answer to that earlier, right?
That would come from the Office of Drinking Water.
My question is, should, you know, we reflect
Mr.
that in
Chairman,
the
I'm sorry.
legislation?
Would you repeat your question? I didn't hear you.
Should that language of the legislation? Should it say an applicant to demonstrate, you know, via the Office of Drinking Water or whoever to demonstrate that?
We could certainly change the language to reflect that. However, that's the purpose of this legislation, is that we're establishing this to be incumbent upon the Office of Drinking Water to do the testing. But I'm not opposed to making any changes.
Yeah. Delegate Krizek, yeah.
Thank you. Just to follow up on Delegate Hodges' question, do you mind just kind of walking us through how you see an applicant, how they would approach this if they wanted to tap into these funds? No pun intended.
So the idea is that we establish a system and a mechanism that is in place so that if you have someone who has a private well, that there is a system in place where they can apply or they can ask for it to be tested, right? And then if the contaminants are found, then if there is a serious economic need and they are not able to take care of this on their own, then there is a process that they can go through and they can establish the economic need. And then we can make sure that they get the proper things taken, the filtration systems and things like that taken care of so that they are not drinking contaminated drinking water.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, just to
Yeah,
follow up.
Delegate Krizek.
So what I'm concerned about is it's kind of, I feel like, how does one know in the beginning that they're going to need the filtration system if they haven't tested the water yet?
Well, that is the second part of it. So, again, the identification of the fact that they want to have it tested, right? The testing takes place, the contaminants are identified, and then they know.
Okay, any other questions before we vote? Any comments or discussion? Okay. All those in favor of endorsing this concept Delegate Campbell's going to have to go find money for, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? No. Great. Delegate Campbell, thanks for
Thank you.
2.5 visits.
Thank you.
Staying on that until we get more fidelity on this.
Okay.
I still think we need more
Okay.
fidelity on this one.
Okay. MJ, you got that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do. Senator Marsden?
Yeah, Marsden's online.
Yes. I don't know that I'm allowed to vote remotely.
MJ says you're allowed to vote because we have quorum.
Oh, okay. I vote yes.
Your vote is noted, sir.
Great. Thanks, Senator. Okay. Next up, SLAF. We had a presentation in June. We had a presentation in June and some discussion in June, and then at the meeting we didn't have quorum at in October, we had a presentation from DEQ about the cost effectiveness of projects over the years through both the WQIF and the SLAF. And actually, I read in the paper, I think this weekend, that the governor is looking at trying to figure out how to look at these programs to figure out if we're spending our money wisely or not. And this idea was actually an idea that Senator Peterson gave me right before he left. We spend a lot of money through the WQIF and the SLAF, but we don't always look at cost effectiveness. And Director Rolban told me that right now, I think some cost effectiveness information is included in the WQIF application process, but not the SLAF process. And they came up with this language. If you all see the one-page document. Yeah. I did?
You skipped the legislation.
Oh, you're right. I skipped 4. Sorry. I skipped my bill.
Back to it if you want to keep up.
Yeah, stick with
Almost finished.
Okay, yeah, let's knock out this one first. Let's knock out number 5 first. Okay. And well, we'll see. I know Doug Abova has some in-depth thoughts about this. So, and Doug Abova and myself and Director Rolban have been in conversation for the last 24 hours about this, trying to figure out the best way to go after this. So, sitting in front of you is the idea that I came up with, just to say the grant applications have to have the total life cycle capital and operating costs per pound of pollutant involved removed so that we can evaluate this type of grant versus other types of pollutant removals that we do, just so we have the information for trying to figure out how to do this program best long-term. So that was basically what I came up with. Delga Bulba, you have thoughts, I'm sure. What do you, even though you're not in the queue, why don't you provide your thoughts?
So genuinely put, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and you know, I I think like all of us want to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck for all of our stormwater or all of our water quality programs. So that's stormwater, that's agricultural BMPs, that's wastewater. I guess my concerns and my thoughts are twofold. The first one, and I see Brandon Bowl in the audience, and so maybe he can come up and make sure my understanding is correct. But for SLAF in particular, the application already highlights on the front page that cost effectiveness is very important, and the director of DEQ in awarding these grants can set a cap with respect to effectiveness. And the information that's collected in the application already allows you to look at what your cost efficiency is for the state funds that are being spent on these projects, right? So the application already says, hey, how many pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus are you going to remove, and then what is the cost of the program? So I guess I'm struggling with respect to what end do we need to have additional language. The other part that I guess I'm struggling with is the part here about total life cycle capital and operating costs. And part of the concern is that once a project is built, that is 100% the responsibility of the locality. You're not talking about state money whatsoever. The locality is on the hook for that. And what I don't want to do is require a lot of additional information to have to be put in if it's not going to actually benefit us with respect to understanding how we're going to apply these funds. And so, I don't know, Mr. Bull, if you want to come up and say whether I'm accurate with respect to that already being collected, but I don't want to put another hurdle in front of local governments who are trying to implement stormwater management mandates that are imposed by the state. I'm all for collecting data if it's going to be meaningful, but I'm just not quite sure that we're going to get much more bang for our buck if we require this additional level of effort.
Mr. Bull, welcome. I hear Director Rolband's down the hall learning about data centers.
Yes, Chairman Saravel, Delegate Bulova, to your question, one of the things that was mentioned at the last meeting of the State Water Commission is the WQIF and the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund, or SLAF, collect different types of data. And so, as Director Rolband mentioned in his presentation last time, it is very challenging to make an apples-to-apples comparison as far as the effectiveness of these different grant programs. And you are correct, Delegate Bulova. There is information currently collected through the SLAF program about cost efficiency, but the programs collect different information. I know with the SLAF, we historically have always tracked total phosphorus because stormwater compliance in Virginia is historically tied to phosphorus as the keystone pollutant. We only started tracking total nitrogen in reductions in 2023, and total suspended solids is only estimated for stream reduction projects. We also only ask for useful life information currently for manufactured BMPs, so not everything is tracking that total life cycle cost in SLAF. And then in the Water Quality Improvement Fund, or WQIF, of course, the discharge limits of the projects are tracked through the project grant agreements. These can be in either total nitrogen or total phosphorus, or both. Useful life is sometimes included. So to summarize, one of the things Director Rolband has been very interested in is getting total life cycle cost. So hopefully that answers your question. I should, of course, have prefaced this by saying that, of course, DEQ does not have a position on this bill, but we are, of course, happy to provide technical assistance and answer any questions.
Doug Bove, you have a follow-up on that, and then I got Delegate Krizak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points. And so with respect to life cycle costs, Isn't that information that you readily have already? And so we know that a wet pond or a bioretention facility has a lifespan of 20 years, and that the average O&M costs are going to be whatever dollar amount that is. And so wouldn't it be easier for DEQ to simply take the information that you're already getting and apply that to standard formulas? Because that's all a local government would end up doing, correct?
So I'm looking back at our Water Division Director, Scott Boris. I'm going to phone a friend if that's okay.
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Morris.
Good morning. We do have the information on a generic basis, but we don't have it on a site-specific basis, so we don't track it accurately for each individual project. But as an aggregate, we could apply something generic across all the projects, if that makes sense.
Dr. Bowler, go ahead.
Yeah, and so how would a locality do that on a site-by-site project? How are you going to predict that this wet pond is going to last 15, 20, 25 years, or is going to cost X amount of dollars per year to operate and maintain? I mean, the locality is going to rely on previous studies that DEQ already has.
Delegate Boulevard, I think that's the discussion point right now is we don't have the data for that long-term life cycle for those projects, so we wouldn't know definitively what those are. We would be applying those generic thresholds to those, and if we were to go start tracking that from locality to locality basis, they would provide that information to us, and then we could have a conglomerate of information and data, and then we'd apply that holistically across all of them. So the answer is you have to compile the data first before you can have that generic one. Otherwise, you're going to have to rely on some of those generic studies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess, is this really the best way to get that information? Because now you're applying for a grant and you're asked to look into your crystal ball to predict whether this facility is going to have a lifespan of 15, 20, 25 years. Don't you already have something called the DEQ BMP warehouse where you've got that longitudinal data that you'd be able to use that to figure out how long these BMPs are lasting before they have to go through major upgrades?
You could apply that as the metric, Delegate Boulevard, yes. Okay.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, and I guess just to wrap up, my concern is I don't know that there is anything that you can't already do through current enabling authority. You already require certain information in your application process, and so I don't know that you don't. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you've got the authority to collect whatever information you think is already useful. I guess the final thing is what are you going to do with that information? We are woefully behind with respect to meeting our stormwater quality standards. We are behind in agricultural BMPs. We still have a lot more to go with wastewater, and so I don't think it's a matter of taking money from one sector and putting it in the others. We need to be doing all of these areas. Anyways, I'm concerned about what are you going to use if we're going to go through the extra effort. What are we going to use that information for?
Chairman Servell, Delegate Boulevard, you are correct. We do have authority through the existing SLAP program to collect additional data beyond what we're doing now. As I understand this bill and budget language, though, it would take that discretionary action and require it. So while I know Director Rollband has an interest in getting this data, a future DEQ director may not share that interest, and this legislation and companion budget language would require it. And as far as what it would be used for, as I understand the bill and budget language at this time, it's just a data collection to allow for apples-to-apples comparison between these different programs.
Right. Yeah, Delegate Bova.
Thank you.
And I got Krizek and Stewart.
Yeah, last comment, and I appreciate it very much, Mr. Chairman. And I guess kind of the last thing I want to raise to kind of my fellow Water Commission members is that over the years, WQIF and all of our water funding programs have gotten really, really complicated to the point that I would challenge any one of us to kind of understand Water Quality Improvement Fund versus Natural Resources Commitment Fund, what those funding streams are, how they're divvied up. And I do think, and there's been interest expressed by a number of stakeholders as well as the administration about kind of stepping back and looking at this from a more holistic approach. I would absolutely support that. I guess my concern is if we piecemeal it like this, I think we add some additional burdens on localities that are really struggling to go ahead and meet state mandates. And instead of doing that, I'd rather have us, say, hey, yes, probably time to look back at the whole program together and make sure that it is operating as cost efficiently as possible. But that's kind of what I wanted to throw out there as a potential alternative to doing something specific like this.
Doug, we don't care how complicated it is. We all have you to ask questions about it. So. Delegate Krizak.
Chairman Surville, thank you. I think I have a friendly amendment that actually will address Delegate Bulova's very good question there. I mean, I agree that rather than use a crystal ball and try to figure out what it's going to look like, what the total life cycle capital will be, it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse. What if we did something like this and said, and the grant at the end of this D, say, and the grant applicant shall report the total life cycle capital and operating cost per pound of pollution removed in its annual grant reporting or something like that. That way we get the information, it's done. It's not required to get the grant, but it's specific so that some new director will still be able to get this information, even if he doesn't want to. It'll be required that they report on it, and you could figure out whether it's a annual or after the grant's finished or some post grant reporting. But I know all grant applications, that's only the first part of the process. You always have to come back and report on how the money was spent.
Be friendly to your cause.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for asking. And I guess I would say that our localities already each year have to report to DEQ that they have inspected and maintained their public stormwater management facilities. And so I guess I would get back to the point before, which is DEQ is already getting the information that they need, and or there's other ways for them to get that information if they need to tweak it. I'm just nervous about baking that into the code because I'm not quite sure that this is I hate to do it on the fly and add extra work for localities that are really struggling, and would honestly like to step back a little bit and take a look at the program as a whole.
Okay, Senator Stewart, you had a question or thought.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I understand what Delegate Bulova is saying, and I don't disagree in many respects, except I don't understand why we wouldn't want this information to be included with these grant applications so that we know we're getting the biggest bang for the buck and that we're looking for technology that does the best job it can do when we have limited money for grants. And so while I understand the additional burden, I think it's important. I mean, we're faced with some pretty significant challenges in water quality going forward. Many respects, we've been kicking this can down the road for years, and now we're faced with a situation where we've got to do something, both in water quality and water quantity. So I understand what Delegate Bulova is saying, but I think we should move forward with this. Again, these things have a long way to travel, and I think what this commission does is we endorse ideas. And I listened very carefully to the witnesses, and I think it's important to note that they said they could consider this. This director could if he so chooses. The next may not. And talking about life cycle, they say sometimes they consider it. Well, why wouldn't we consider all this in a grant application? So I'm going to move we support the concept at least and try to move this forward, and we've got a whole session to work on it.
Delegate Trant.
I was wondering if Brandon and his colleague, could you please remind me what the utilization rate for these grants are? Are we like undersubscribed? Are we, all the money is being allocated? Could you let me know?
Way oversubscribed, I think, on WQIF.
Yeah, it depends on which one you're referencing. So like the SLAF, that is currently, if you look at the SLAF assessment, we're currently utilizing a majority of the funds, and we potentially need more funds in the future, based off the assessment that was most recently done, going up to, what year was that, 2029? So if you look at that, there's a need for additional resources for SLAF. Same thing for WQIF. If you look at the long term for WQIF, there is more need in the program that's currently been authorized for payment. And currently, the DEQ agency director is obligated to pay out those or be a signatory on those grant agreements. So if you look at the long-term need for the WQIF, there is more projects than funding currently available if you look over the long term. Not currently the cash flow needs, but the long-term needs.
I think that was the presentation we got at our last meeting in October. Yeah, I think they're both, there's especially a lot of pressure on the WQIF long term, not in the short. Okay. So, Delegate Bulb, I think you told me offline that the Chesapeake Bay Commission is talking about looking at this, or talking about getting us to look at this, or what?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, what I would anticipate based on discussions with the Bay Commission and other stakeholders is that we would have a budget amendment this year that would pull together a stakeholder group to kind of untangle and look at from a holistic standpoint all of our water quality funding programs. And again, depending on how we want to move forward, my suggestion is that we would endorse that concept before we go in and start requiring specific information through our grant applications. And again, it's a cart before the horse thing. And so there very well may be some changes that are needed to the code. I guarantee there's probably changes needed to the code. But before requiring additional information at this point, I think it would be prudent to step back and conceptually endorse that larger process.
When are they going to make their mind up?
I can't give you a specific timeline, but I do know that we are putting together the budget amendment language now, and I'm more than happy to share it with the commission when we have it. But I don't want to prematurely release anything. But it is our intention to introduce something for the 2025 session.
Okay, but Doug, do you see like us endorsing this specific approach as being necessarily hostile or inconsistent with that? We're not putting this in law. It's just this commission is saying that we think this is something that needs to be looked at, and I don't see any reason why the two approaches couldn't be reconciled during session, right?
Yeah, and I guess, Mr. Chairman, I do have concerns with the very specific language and what we're requiring localities to do. So either it's going to require a lot of additional effort from the locality to look into a crystal ball, and or they're going to provide information that's just based on studies and standards that have been developed over the last 20 years, and so it's not going to be anything that DEQ couldn't already dig out from a textbook or from a guidance manual. I think if we wanted to pair them up, we could endorse the concept of looking at this more holistically, with a particular focus on ensuring that our investments are done in a cost-effective, cost-efficient manner, and what additional data might be collected from all three sectors, whether that's ag, stormwater, or wastewater, in order for us to make the best decisions possible. But I am concerned about endorsing specific language. I think it could easily be part, though, of the larger or broader conversation.
Appreciate the respect you show for this very important commission's power, the influence it has on the remaining General Assembly relative to the Chesapeake Bay Commission. Anybody else have any thoughts about how we ought to proceed?
Senator Serval.
Yeah, Senator Perry.
I do. I think Delegate Bullivan makes a very good point. I think we have a lot of regulation going on, and he made the very specific point that these folks already have access to this data. And if we have the opportunity this session to take a step back and look at things more holistically and perhaps come up with better ideas, I don't know why we wouldn't take a beat to do that and perhaps come up with legislation that works better as opposed to jamming something through and then subsequently regret that, hey, maybe this wasn't the best way to go about it, while additionally putting additional burdens on localities in the process.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Chairman?
Who was that?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, Marsden, then Hodges.
Thank you so much. I think Delegate Bulova's point leads towards the determination as to who is the best person to evaluate life cycles and this sort of data. I would think it would be better to not have individual grant appliers trying to guess what that information would be, and that really DEQ or whoever should be making the determination as to their proposal, as to what the history of what they're proposing how it's performed, so that they would have better information and more consistent information, because I would guess that you'd want to gild the lily a little bit if you were an applicant to try to make your project look better. And I think you'd get more consistency if it was developed by the folks who are evaluating the grants.
Is in the queue. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sitting here today, I kind of agree with everyone, which makes it a challenge. But as you said just a little while ago, how can we bring that together and reconcile sometime during session? And there's always a way. There's always a way to solve a problem. And I think, in moving forward with the concept, whether we have enactment clause on this to move forward with work groups and so forth, but there can be a way to work this out over time between now and session and coming together and make that work, which would be my recommendation, to move forward with the concept. And everyone's concept in some way, shape, or form, to be able to reconcile that during session.
Okay. Any other thoughts? It sounds like me and Stuart want to go forward, and everybody else wants to table it for till next year. Yeah.
We want to get things done. We want to do it right. We want to get things done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Delegate. Okay. So Delegate, was it Lopez or Tran? I heard you good.
Well, nobody seconded my motion, Mr. Chairman, so I think we're kind
And
of...
Lopez, this is going to go through your committee if it goes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What does the chairman of the House Ag Committee think?
As someone snarkily said down here, we want to act, and we know that we need to act, but we also want to do it the right way. And so if I had to paraphrase Senator Russell Perry, I'd say that it's important we do this the right way. And so I would actually stand with Delegate Bulova on this.
Okay. It would be nice if we had something to endorse, but doesn't sound like your budget language is ready yet.
Chairman, budget language isn't ready, but I don't know if it would harm to endorse it conceptually. I mean, really, the idea is, that we would, initiate a more comprehensive study of all of our water quality funding programs to ensure that they are as efficient and as effective as possible.
That sounds like maybe a motion, and I would second it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
speaking to the motion,
Yeah, okay.
can
It's
we
been seconded.
include the in that language, Delegate Bulova, that would include the total life cycle capital and operating cost per pound of pollutant removed? That's something to look at.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have an objection to that.
Okay, what I started to scribble out was DEQ shall convene a stakeholder group to study the state's stormwater and wastewater grant programs to determine the most effective and efficient methods to promote water quality. And in such process, shall also study the total life cycle capital and operating costs per pound of pollutant removed, or something like that. Does that sound about right?
Yep.
If you speak on mic.
I mean, I'm sure as Delegate Bulova, Mr. Chairman, I think as Delegate Bulova finalizes kind of the draft amendment he would submit, I think it is that the process would look at the utilization or like necessity of having this particular data be included with the grants, right? The process itself wouldn't be looking at the life cycle capital of each of these projects.
I think, Mr. Chairman, I guess to Delegate Tran's point, yeah, I wasn't envisioning, I think we were talking broadly about life cycle costs, not saying that DEQ or any locality would necessarily be the right place to go ahead and collect it. But I think generally the idea of life cycle costs can be part of that broader conversation.
Okay. Okay. What I wrote down is DEQ shall convene a stakeholder group to study the state's stormwater and wastewater grant programs to determine the most effective and efficient methods to promote the utilization of such programs. And Delegate, and shall also consider the total life cycle capital and operating costs per pound of pollutant removed as a possible criteria or something like that? As a possible criteria? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think so. I think we might want to back up and just say that the commission endorses in concept rather than we are directing. But
Yeah, we can't direct anything here.
Yeah.
Okay. Senator Perry, is that consistent with your second?
Sure.
Okay. Everybody okay with that suggestion and concept? Can somebody, Anissa, or one of you guys write this out eventually so we have something in writing about what we did? You can try and read my chicken scratch over here, but okay. Does everybody know what we're doing? Yep. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Is there anybody opposed? Aye. Nobody opposed. Okay. 4. Great. Back to number 4. Okay. This one's a little more complicated. So, Anissa, do we have the official DLS version distributed or no? It was?
Is this not it?
That's it.
Is this it?
251034.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah, LD 251-03476D. Okay. Okay, so this is a bill that's suggested by myself and Delegate Lopez. And this tags on to a presentation we got at our last meeting in October, where we heard that the two private water company providers in Virginia who both agree that something like this is necessary. And basically what this bill does is it basically takes the equivalent of the SAVE Act, which was passed in 2010, and applies it to private water systems. If you want to know what the SAVE Act is, if you go to the 2010 session and look under Senator Peterson, you'll see the SAVE Act. That was a bill that he passed in 2010 to allow gas companies to start to fix their out and old and updated infrastructure to prevent sort of future leaks and pipeline explosions and things like that before they actually fail. There's a couple differences, though. I went through and compared the two, just trying to see what the differences are, and I'm going to try and walk you all through the differences really quick. So if you look at the very first statute here, 56-235-11 7.1, lines 8 through 16. This allows one of these private water systems to apply in a rate-based proceeding for both water and sewer at the same time. Gas companies obviously only have,
Chairman.
Senator Perry?
I think you're referencing a lined copy. I just have I think an unlined
It was the last
copy.
one in the packet I had. I had both.
It's not in my packet.
That's the last one.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So this allows them to apply for both. Anyways, gas companies don't have two different, so you don't have the line copy either.
Yeah, I think we have both copies, and I just wanted to make sure we were clear on which copy was the one that we were going to base the conversation on.
Yeah, Anissa, why did we get two?
Mr. Chairman, we have the revisions, that was the PDF one, and then we have the redraft version, that would be
What?
3476.
This is the redraft.
Yes,
This is the final version.
I believe so.
Okay, I think that's right. So we're working off the red line. I think the early version was the version that was submitted to DLS, I think, and then the red line is the one that popped out after we made some revisions on Friday.
76. 76.
76.
Got it. All right, just want to make sure we're all on the same line.
Yeah.
3476D is not a red line.
This, yeah.
It's under, it's not a red line.
This one's not red line either. It's the DLS version.
Well, you said red line, I didn't say it.
Oh,
It's not
no.
red line, it's underline.
Yeah, oh no, it's a DLS version. It's a
Yes.
official version, yeah. Yeah, okay. So the first statute just allows them to apply for wastewater and private water at the same time. When you do a gas project, there's no need to do two different projects together in the same, they do all their stuff in one rate-based proceeding. This just allows water and sewer to be done together. That's why that's in there and that's why that's different.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so next, if you go down to line 27, under eligible infrastructure. You go down to line 27, on eligible infrastructure. The eligible infrastructure under the Gas Act was a little bit different. And this one just says the only kinds of projects they can apply for are ones that maintain or enhance safety, reliability, or efficiency, or facilitate compliance with state or federal environmental requirements, and it explicitly excludes, in this special kind of rate case proceeding, anything that involves stuff that was included in their last rate-based proceeding or stuff that's going to serve new customers. So if they want to serve new customers, they want to expand their system, they have to go through their traditional rate-based proceeding. So this has to do with stuff that enhances safety, reliability, or efficiency, or compliance with federal or state environmental rules in their current system. So for example, if there's a new PFAS rule that comes down, this allows them to go and make an application for PFAS, which is one of the reasons these private water systems or these private companies are going to be called upon to be buying more systems is because of these new PFAS or lead and copper rules and stuff like that. Okay? Then, if you go down to lines, you might have questions about everything between line 32 and 53. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are taken directly from the SAVE Act. So that's not... Okay, so return on investment, revenue conversion factor, depreciation, property taxes, all that stuff, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is taken from the SAVE Act. What's different is unreimbursed costs of relocating facilities due to highway projects and O&M expenses associated with eligible infrastructure that are not included in the revenue requirement last approved by the commission.
6 and 7.
6 and 7 are different from the SAVE Act. And the water guys explained to me that they often have expenses that gas companies don't have associated with highway projects. And then lines 64 through 71 are a little different because we're dealing with water instead of gas. These are the kinds of things that you see only in water systems, not in gas systems, right? So things like compliance with the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, that gas companies don't have that. They also don't have pumps, motors, blowers, tanks, and mechanical equipment or whatever. So that's where that comes from. And then I think that's pretty much it when I went through and compared the two. But the idea here is to try to facilitate, to make it, to give these private water companies the same powers that gas companies have to improve outdated and really old systems, and which will also give them a better reason or more certainty when they go in and they're asked to purchase these systems, when they're asked to buy them, which is happening increasingly with the additional capital requirements that are happening with our new environmental regulations and with the lack of investment that you've seen in a lot of these systems over the years. That's what we heard at our last meeting, and that's what this was what we heard described in concept. This is it put in writing. So that's what the bill does. Delegate Lopez, you want to say anything?
Yeah. Just to piggyback on sort of why we're doing this, if you think about what the Society of Civil Engineers, the American Society of Civil Engineers said about Virginia's water and wastewater infrastructure system, I mean, the Virginia drinking water system is a C+. We need $9.4 billion in additional capital investment. Our wastewater system is a D+, and we need $6.4 billion in additional capital investment. And then if you think about this in context, in the 1970s, the federal government provided at least 63% of all of this funding, and now it provides less than 10% of this funding. And so we're trying to find unique and innovative ways to bring along the wastewater and water, safe drinking water infrastructure in the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Delegate. And Delegate Tran, you have questions? And I also know there's some people here that can answer technical questions too if we need it. Go ahead, Delegate Tran.
Mr. Chairman, I do have questions, and I don't know who would be best to answer them, but maybe I'll ask them and then somebody can come up. All right. So just, I remember this conversation very distinctly from the October meeting and am empathetic to the need. I would like to have a better understanding of what costs are going to be passed on to consumers and how is public interest defined. And just not being familiar with the SAVE Act, if somebody could help me understand that, in lines, the only kind of discussion around public interest, it seems to be in lines 15, 16, that the SEC shall determine that such allocation or combination is not in the public interest after considering the impacts of the public utilities, waste, and wastewater service customers. So, so just helping me understand that. And then the second part of my question is, after reviewing lines 33 to 50, what is left that is going to be the company's cost that will not be passed on to consumers? Thank you.
Sorry, Delegate Tran, was your first question about the language on lines like 13 through 16?
Yeah, it was more around kind of the what is public interest? How is that considered vis-a-vis the SAVE Act that we are borrowing from?
There's an attorney up back there I think can come up and answer, but I can tell you that from what we're doing right now over in the Commission on Utility Regulation, trying to come up with a sort of a clear definition of public interest in code that people can go reference to figure out what it means without going and reading 30 opinions from the State Corporation Commission. Right now, that's typically what you have to do. If you want to know what the public interest is, you have to call the SCC, and they'll give you a two-page, single-space memo with 30 opinions attached until you here's the answer. But maybe, Council, can you answer that question? I don't know what, haven't asked the question on water before.
Thank you, Chairman.
What's your name?
Tim Biller with Hunt and Andrews Carth. And thank you, Chairman Searle, Delegate Tran. In terms of the public interest, this will all be going through the State Corporation Commission. And so they'll be going through their normal review that they do for any cost that a utility puts through in terms of determining whether that's an appropriate cost for the utility to recover, whether the costs themselves are appropriate. And so that's still all embedded in here, that we'll still go through a full commission process to review. This is more just a process to further enhance the review of those costs and the recovery of those costs. But won't change the overall costs in the long run.
Okay, Delegate Tran, you have further questions on that?
No, I think it sounds like it would be helpful to have that common definition that you were alluding to, Mr. Chairman. My second part of the question is...
Before you go on from that, Mr. Diller, right?
Biller.
Senator Stewart has suggested... Do you have the red line? Do you have the official version, the line version in front of you?
Yes.
has suggested that on line 14, we strike shall and change it to may, and then strike unless and change it to if, and strike the word not from the next sentence, which would just basically mean that the State Corporation Commission may allow an allocation or combination if the commission determines it is in the public interest, instead of telling what they shall do if it's not. Do you see any problem with that?
I don't see any problem with that. I believe it's still consistent with the intent here.
Okay. Senator Stewart moves and Delegate Bulova seconds that amendment. Is there any discussion about that? No. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? No. Okay. Delegate Tran, what's your next question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My next question, just to reiterate, when I look through the, what I think you had said, lines 33 through 50, numbers 1 through 5 were from the SAVE Act.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand, are there any costs remaining that would not be passed on to consumers?
Delegate Tran, I assume you mean costs, because remember, this is not a general rate base. This statute doesn't apply to sort of general rate-based proceedings that they have to go through every year. This only has to do with these types of very specific projects regarding these types of improvements to this infrastructure, right? So we're talking about additional costs on these types of projects, not the overall system.
Yes, thank you for that clarification, Mr. Chair. Are there any other infrastructure costs related to like a specific project that would not be passed on?
Yes, Barry Suits, Virginia American Water. Am I good to go? Yes,
sorry.
The costs related to this act are those costs are directly related to provision of service, reliable service, meets water quality compliance requirements. Just the easiest for me to give you some examples of what wouldn't be included: office buildings, computer systems, vehicles, tools and equipment, those things that we use, with our employees or as part of service, but more as a support as opposed to, the treatment plants or the pipe that distributes water to the customers.
Okay. I see D-Steph and Perry in the queue. D-Steph.
I'll defer to Perry just in case she asks my question. How's that?
Okay. Senator Perry, you're up.
First of all, I appreciate the change of not in the public interest. I'm not sure that appears elsewhere in the code that we have the SEC look at something and see if it's not in the public interest. I think that's generally that they look at and see if it is in the public interest. But my question about public interest, and I know Senator Serval referenced this earlier, is that definition that's used by the SEC. And the way that I understand that boils down, and I think in my district in particular, we've seen it it played out in what I would contend is not a great way with data centers, is that public interest generally means like how much is it going to cost? And so I just have concerns, and I don't know if you can address them in what else it is that you think the SEC is going to be looking at and determining if this is in the public interest or not.
Counsel, you got a thought about that?
Thank you, Senator Serval and Delegate Perry.
I'm a senator.
Senator Perry, I apologize. And I will say that there are some statutes in the code that do say not contrary to public interest. So this sort of language is in there, but I think this is consistent with the statute. In terms of what the commission is looking at, this is the commission in all the statutes it has broad discretion to look at the types of costs that are included, whether they're reasonable, and most of the definitions aren't overly specific to not hem the commission in terms of what costs they can include, not include.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Perry.
I understand they're not specific, and I understand that the SEC has taken that as basically just looking at the financial portion of it, and that's exactly my concern, is that if we don't define what the public interest is, then they are that they have interpreted it, right? If we don't interpret it for them, apparently, then they interpret it in one specific way. And so that's my concern, and my question is, do you have any other understanding of that?
No, I think the intention, as I understand this, is to set a framework through this for the commission to use their discretion within, but to not limit their discretion.
Mr. Chairman. Right, to not limit their discretion, but in their interpretation, you would agree with me that it just is limited to financial considerations. Is that right?
I believe that's correct.
Thank you.
Sure. I was hoping mine would be answered, but it didn't. So I see that in line 9, we're very specific, talking about public utilities that provide both water and wastewater services. In Hampton Roads, in the Tidewater region, we have HRSD, which handles sanitary only, and it handles it for cities, counties, and towns. However, each of those city, counties, and towns, either you're on wells or they have their own individual system. So is there a specific area in the Commonwealth that this is targeted to? Are we not worried about Hampton Roads? Are we not worried about the rest of the Commonwealth? Or is this only to one specific jurisdiction or area? And I have a follow-up question as well.
I don't think it was for any one area. Mr. Beckton, you have a reaction to that?
Either Mr. Suits or Dilbar, either one?
Sorry, not Beckton. Yeah.
Barry Suits again.
Suits, sorry, not Beckton. Suits, yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
As you asked the question, this would only pertain to those areas where they're served by private water or wastewater utilities in the Commonwealth. So it wouldn't apply to HRSD. It applied to only those service territories served by private companies.
And those are basically everywhere, right?
The HOAs.
Everywhere that a private utility regulated by the State Corporation Commission exists. So not all HOAs. It would pertain to all the service territories of the private water and wastewater utilities that are under the jurisdiction of the State Corporation Commission.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yeah,
clarification.
yeah, D-Steph.
On line 9, it says public utility that provides both water and wastewater services. So you have to be able to do sewer and water. So it as my understanding that, and you're private, so most jurisdictions don't have one, have both together. They have one or the other, and then they're handled individually. So what specific area, what specific jurisdiction are we looking at targeting here? Because this isn't all of Virginia. A lot of Virginia's, like have regional wastewater, and water itself is not regional, or it's well in some of the rural areas.
Again, maybe I'll say a little more. It pertained to those areas where private utilities governed by the commission have both water and wastewater customers. So for instance, just as an example for us, that's the Dale City area. We serve that water and wastewater both. We serve Cape Charles, water and wastewater both. Some of the other companies have similar service territories that have both. So, that's the reason for the wording in the bills. So.
Yeah, but I think to maybe address D-Steph's concern about having a broader impact, council, couldn't we limit this section 56-235.11:1 to any public utility that provides both? But we limit it to, on your second statute, on line 62 through 63, you define a wastewater utility as an investor-owned public service company. So couldn't we limit the applicability of this first statute to wastewater utilities as defined in this new code section? That way it wouldn't pick up all the public ones. It would pick up just where you have just the private ones?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Delegate Bulba keeps trying to answer D-Steph's question. Why don't you, maybe you have a better idea than I do.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the way I understand this is these are two separate concepts. And so the first part, the recovery of water and wastewater, is for systems that provide both water and wastewater and allows them to balance the costs off in terms of the rates for each of those. The second part, that new Chapter 31, is a whole separate concept in terms of those EIRE plans, and that could apply to anybody who does just water, just wastewater, or does both. But I think that first part is just specific to those that provide both in terms of balancing off rates. The really important part is that Chapter 31, and I think that applies to any water or wastewater utility, regardless of whether they provide both.
Except I think, Delegate, the second statute only applies to private investor-owned public service companies. It doesn't apply to public ones.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think the thing is because our public ones owned by localities or authorities don't go through the State Corporation Commission at all. So we wouldn't want this to apply to them anyways. They already have as much flexibility as they need.
Okay.
Could you restate that? I'm sorry. Could you say that again?
So Mr. Chairman, the Chapter 31 only applies to the privately owned public utilities, the investor-owned public utilities, because those are the only utilities that go through the State Corporation Commission. If you're Fairfax Water, if you're Hampton Roads Sanitary Authority, you don't have to go through the State Corporation Commission at all. You've got the flexibility to figure out how you're going to arrange this. So this just applies to those
Privately
private ones.
owned public utilities.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the last question on this.
D-Staff, back to D-Staff.
And then I'll go offline and grab Mr. Dillard or Suits information to talk about the future where we have an HRSD line going on the Eastern Shore where Cape Charles will eventually be picked up on that. But on line 40, where we talk about what's included in the cost, we specifically put out such external costs such as including legal costs and consultant costs.
Yeah.
So I don't recall seeing this in other sections of the code.
Delegate Krizak asked me that exact same question about 10 minutes ago, and that's contained in the SAVE Act we passed in 2010. It's word for word taken out of that. I can show it to you on my laptop right here if you want to see it.
Okay. Well, no, I trust you. I'll pull it up on the laptop too.
Okay.
And figure it out later. But my concern is, I mean, you can drive up the cost a lot with consulting fees and legal costs.
Subject to SEC.
A little bit of a concern. I have a little bit of a concern on that.
Right. Subject to SEC reviewing it, deciding it was reasonable, prudent, and not like over the top and overdone. Right.
And
right. The SEC would look at that and ascertain whether it was excessive. Right.
Correct, Senator. And I will note, Senator Steph, that that specific reference to external costs and for legal and consulting, that is solely limited to when in one of these rate proceedings the utility has to propose a new return on equity, which is a very consultant-heavy process. I will note, to my knowledge, in any of the gas company SAVE proceedings, that language has never been used because they haven't reset it in this proceeding. That's typically done in a full base rate case. So that's a very limited language in there.
Okay, Delegate Lawfer, you've been in the queue for a while, and then I got Hodgers. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
So how are we addressing what I keep hearing in my community is HOAs, which are privately owned utility or water specific. This is not part of that? That's what I thought we were trying to address. Sorry.
No, I don't think this has anything to do with HOAs, right?
So they would not be these funds would not be available to.
It's not funds. It's a process.
I know. Sorry. But I thought we were trying to address. I missed the October meeting. Sorry, but so we're not addressing the concern of HOAs having private water. No. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
No, I don't think so. No. Okay. Hodges. You disappeared. Did you turn your mic on?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here. How many of these do we actually have in the Commonwealth, and as far as the privatized that it would affect? Is there any way? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I can answer, Delegate Hodges. There's two major private water and wastewater utilities. That's Virginia American Water and Aqua, or Essential Utilities. I forget what their name is. There's another few smaller ones in the Commonwealth. Altogether, we serve about 500,000 people. So that gives you a sense of the size of the private sector. It's not kind of Doug Lawfer's point. It's not the majority.
The biggest is the city of Alexandria, right?
City of Alexandria is our service territory and the biggest, yes. Does that answer your question or help?
It does. I mean, we've got the companies, but then how many localities and so forth does it also affect as well? Do we have any idea of?
We have, down to the smallest, maybe 120 localities that are served by us. I don't know the numbers for the other entities, but we serve Alexandria and some areas right adjacent to that, some areas in Prince William County, the Eastern Shore or Northern Neck. We have pretty significant number of localities there.
But
Does that
Doug, I
help?
think one of the important points, though, is part of the purpose of this is to give the companies more clarity and certainty about how they can make applications to fix up these systems that they purchase that are in really bad shape when they go to buy them and have a way to recover capital more quickly.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Doug
as well,
Hodges.
and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm trying to recall the JLARC study that was probably done about 10 years ago. And even though it didn't address the privatized area, it did reinforce that we need to be able to invest and to be able to fix this because it is a major problem. And we've got to find a way to fix it.
Correct.
Yeah, right, especially with PFAS coming down, it's going to be a huge problem. Yeah, we do HOAs next year. Okay. Any other questions? I don't see anybody else in the queue. Any other questions, concerns, discussion? No. Delegate Krizak, you're reaching for your speak light. No?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I just want to follow up on Senator Steff's concern with line 40 on the such external costs shall include legal costs and the consultant costs. If the witness would come back up, you made some. Are you satisfied that the language preceding that on line 39 is restrictive enough to what you mentioned, or should we massage this language a little further? Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Am I satisfied?
No, yes.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Thank you, Senator Sergio. Yes, I believe so. It's all underneath the heading of the return on net investment, and the discussion that precedes that language is very specific about when the commission will look to reset the return on equity in one of these proceedings versus in a base rate proceeding. And that has been fairly regularly reviewed by the commission, and this has never raised an issue to my knowledge at the commission in the gas company context.
Hey, Delegate Krizak.
Mr. Chairman, follow up. So gas and water are different. Do you see this being similarly rare?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions, concerns, thoughts? No? Okay, Delegate Bolovitran, Perry, your light's on?
I was just going to express some general support for this as we look to decide whether or not we're going to endorse or not. I think the big thing is these are all costs that are going to have to be expended, right? And so it's not like we can avoid the costs. My understanding is these are all costs that are going to be recoverable regardless of the mechanism that is used. However, if the alternative is to put it into your base rates, and those rates are only reviewed every couple years, and so if you do that, you're going to wind up with a stair-step approach, where you're going to have one rate, and then you come back in for a rate review in 4 years, you realize you've spent all this infrastructure and you're going to have to increase that, which makes it really tough for residents to plan, makes it really tough for businesses to plan. This just gives you an opportunity to pull that out. You create a rider, and allows you to slowly increase those rates over time with the same level of accountability. And so, to me, again, as long as you're going to have to make those investments anyways, I would rather have businesses and residents be able to have that predictability in terms of how their rates are going up. So I think it's been used in other areas, and think it's a worthy piece of legislation to consider.
Okay, Tran, and then Perry, you still want to go?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I noted earlier, I'm really empathetic to the need, and having clean water is really essential to our public health. I just want to maybe parking lot for us as a commission, though, is there are not reliable assistance programs for individuals who can't afford to pay their water bill. And so if we see an increase in rates in some of these communities over time, even if it's a slow increase, but over time, that can be a burden for some of these families. The city of Alexandria's poverty rate is a little over 9% in 2023. So If you are the primary provider there, I just want to raise that flag for us as a commission about the need for thinking through the assistance piece.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, concerns? Anybody got a problem with this? Is there a motion we approve it, adopt it, endorse it as amended?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We endorse it, endorse this. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
I'm going to abstain until I get some more details on this.
Okay. Note the abstention by D-Steph. Okay. Yeah, Lopez, then Bullock. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce two special guests in the audience today. We have Lord and Lady Provost of Dundee, Scotland, Mr. Bill and Miss Yvonne Campbell. I'd like to introduce them there. Dundee is the sister city of the city of Alexandria, and Mr. and Mrs. Campbell have been in town doing some special events in the city of Alexandria, and they wanted to come down and see the birthplace of legislative democracy in the New World. So, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're a little less cantankerous than British Parliament, but we get it done here. And Delegate Bullock
stole my thunder.
Oh, he stole your thunder. Okay, great. Okay, now we're on to presentations. What do we got up first? Algae blooms, is that right? Okay, who do we got? Smith Mountain Lake back again. Mr. Looney and Miss Green. Welcome to the Water Commission. As somebody who used to spend his summers on Smith Mountain Lake on my grandfather's family farm, fishing for carp and catfish and crappies and perch and sunfish and everything else, I'm eager to hear what you have to say about problems on Smith Mountain Lake. I hear that the algae blooms keep happening on the Blackwater end of the lake. Yeah?
I'm from Lake Anna.
Oh, or Lake Anna.
Carrie, Smith Mountain Lake will go next.
Yeah, okay. Got it. Well, Lake Anna, you guys got the nuclear reactor that
The
warms your
answer is
lake
yes.
up. Yeah, your nuclear reactor warms your lake up, so it makes it a good environment for algae. So, okay, fire away. I haven't been on Lake Anna yet.
Fatalities, right?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the commission for the opportunity to speak to you today. First of all, the Lake Anna Civic Association is a 501c3 nonprofit with a mission to preserve and conserve Lake Anna and its watershed through community involvement and advocacy. LACA has several standing committees. I chair the Water Quality Committee, and our primary efforts are focused on what I call our legacy water quality monitoring program that we've been executing since 2002 as a level 3 citizen water monitoring program under DEQ's certification. We also implemented a cyanobacteria monitoring program in 2020, a macroinvertebrate monitoring program in 2022, and of course the collection of all of that data is useless if we don't have a data analysis effort to look at that data and determine trends and help our legislators and our local governments decide on budget activities that are useful for any of these programs. We also support a wide range of academic research. It's started with Virginia Tech, focused on the cyanobacteria blooms that we've experienced, but lately Virginia Commonwealth University, University of Virginia. We've been working with Old Dominion because of the harmful algal bloom issues that we've had. We've done student projects with Randolph-Macon College, and we're members of the York River Small Coastal Basin Roundtable, which for now is managed and coordinated by representatives at VIMS. So a little bit about our recreational advisory history at Lake Anna. We've had advisories since 2018 every year. You can see the areas in red on those maps of what areas were under advisory during each of those years. The average number of days that we've been under advisory each year is 104. And that's mainly because once an advisory is put in place, it takes 2 consecutive samplings to remove the advisory or lift that advisory, and DEQ is funded and available to sample the lake once a month. So once an advisory goes in place, it's going to be at least another 60 days before that advisory can be lifted. Not in all cases would it be advisable. In fact, this year, for example, several of our areas on the lower part, that's the North Anna River, came off, were lifted on their own, but the other areas were they just expired on October 31st. All right, so what are we doing at LACA? LACA has an extensive effort underway to address our cyanobacteria issues. Our outreach campaign is titled Kick the Hab, and we have raised more than $200,000 through donations and fundraising. You can note the types of activities that we are engaged on in this slide. We've done several demonstrations using hydrogen peroxide-based algicides, which are more economic or environmentally friendly than the copper-based solutions. We've also tried ultrasound demonstrations, which tend to work in the lower part of the lake due to the different species of cyanobacteria that we have and we find in the lake. And we're continuing those ultrasound demonstrations this year, and we'll continue those next year. We're supporting NOAA's phytoplankton monitoring program. You'll hear more about that from Ms. Green from Smith Mountain, who also does that. And while we're doing a lot of things that are helping nature along, most of this is, of course, a natural process that can occur. And so we're actively pursuing best management practices in the watershed to help remove nutrients before they ever get to the lake. And then finally, there's other things going on. I'm sure you're aware of the 2-year, it's multi-year state-funded study for the Lake Anna region and for the Shenandoah, mainly the North Fork of the Shenandoah River. That's ongoing, and they've just completed pretty much all of their data collection and will be transitioning into their modeling and analysis phase very soon. The Lake Anna Advisory Committee, which I'm also a member of as a Louisa County citizen rep, conducted a comprehensive study of the North Anna River in 2022, and we are currently executing state funding in our phosphorus remediation program, where you provided $1 million of funding in FY24 and $500,000 in FY25. Louisa and Spotsylvania counties are very engaged on this problem. We have their strong support, and I know that their legislative agendas, they're working with many of you on the things that are still needed and continue to be needed to fight the HAB problem that we have at Lake Anna. I will now turn it over to Ms. Green, who will talk about Smith Mountain Lake Association.
Doug Krizek has a question about Lake Anna.
Is any of this, remember the E. coli scare during Memorial Day, and you had four children, I think, were hospitalized and 14 others were diagnosed with E. coli? Is that a part of this whole situation?
No, that would be, that's a bacterial issue. This cyanobacteria, of course, are bacteria, but this is specifically for cyanobacteria, the HAB advisories. VDH would have to issue other advisories for E. coli.
Okay, thank you.
Hodges.
Still in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at the advisories, the economic impact when you have those advisories, have y'all been able to weigh that at all and to look at that?
I don't think anything official has been done. I know that the Lake Anna Business Partnership has looked into it quite extensively. I can tell you that, getting back to the last question, the E. coli situation this year, it's thought that it could, many companies think that they lost half their revenue this year because of that outbreak. We don't seem to see that much of that level of impact on a HAB advisory, but it does have an impact, yes. And it probably needs to be studied, and numbers need to be applied to it.
I think Doug at Lawfer has a question for you also.
I just want to mention Lake Anna is in my district, part of it. And that's what I asked the Board of Supervisors, is to provide an information about how much economic impact is felt when these advisories go up. So to answer your question.
We should be getting an answer then, I guess.
Just so I'm clear, the source, or I guess the non-point source of what's causing this is what? Excess of fertilizers or?
Phosphorus.
Fertilizer.
There's many ways phosphorus can get into the lake. It's also a nitrogen problem. Nitrogen can get into the lake, of course, from the atmosphere. That's why a lot of programs try to deal with the phosphorus side of the issue, not the nitrogen side of the issue, because as fast as you can remove it from the lake, the atmosphere tends to put it right back into the lake. Same with carbon dioxide and other atmospheric elements. The phosphorus remediation program that we implemented is based upon decades worth of research in both academia and in the private industry about how to best approach a freshwater HAB issue, and that is to reduce the amount of phosphorus. Those upper parts of the lake where you saw red, they are, so the scientific term is called eutrophication, and the upper parts of the lake are clearly eutrophic throughout the year, which means they're sick. They have too much phosphorus, too much nitrogen, too much chlorophyll, too much sedimentation potentially. And so that's what we're executing the state funding on, is to reduce the amount of phosphorus. We're taking a slow, measured approach. The fishery is in great shape. If DWR were here to talk to you about it, the fishery is in great shape, and some of that is because of the higher levels of nutrients. But we got to have a balance here. When an area is when 30 parts per billion is kind of the standard for when you're above that, you're eutrophic or sick. Areas of our lake are well over 100 parts per billion in those areas. So we need to fix that first.
Okay, let's hear about Smith Mountain Lake, the jewel of the Blue Ridge.
Thank you for having me. My name is Carrie Green. I'm the chair of the Lake Quality Council of the Smith Mountain Lake Association. I have gotten the chance to meet some of you all since I was here with you last year, about a year ago, to talk about, excuse me, the first of its kind harmful algal bloom situation at Smith Mountain Lake. Much like Lake Anna Civic Association, the Smith Mountain Lake Association is the oldest and largest advocacy group at Smith Mountain Lake. Our mission to protect the water quality of the lake and to promote safe recreation has been in force since 1969, and we operate a water quality monitoring program with Ferrum College, which has gathered water quality monitoring data for 38 years. So if you recall, the summer of 2023 had thrown us for a loop. Not having had widespread harmful algal blooms at Smith Mountain Lake before, we reacted swiftly to provide information to our members and the community, to work closely with state agencies and the community to follow what was being decided about the lake, and to start developing how we as an organization were going to move forward. Following the season, when the advisories ended on the Blackwater arm of the lake, we had more questions than answers, and those few questions are on that slide, but also, why was 2023 the first time that this had happened in such widespread form? What is the condition of the watershed that is leading to harmful algal blooms? Who's studying the watershed? Where do the nutrients come from? And is this going to happen again this year, next year, or year after year? In searching for these answers and developing more questions, a multi-pronged approach to expand our capabilities made sense to our board of directors. We initiated a DocWatch program, which launched this spring with the help of NOAA's Phytoplankton Monitoring Network. Harry and his group also operate through this program. This is truly science, citizen science at its best. 20 docks are monitored every other week for cyanobacteria year-round. We also formed an alliance of community members and businesses to tackle communication and outreach issues that we faced during the 2023 swimming advisory, and we also decide how to react in the future with that community group. They guide our outreach and related initiatives. Smith Mountain Lake Association hired a professional lake management firm to conduct a watershed assessment of just the Blackwater arm of the lake, and I'll speak a bit about that in a moment. And we advocated with you all and our General Assembly folks for a full lake study, which was funded in the most recent budget, following support of our sponsors, Senator Peake and Delegate Bulova, and from all of you when I came here last year, so thank you very much. Although we had no blooms, believe it or not, that triggered swimming advisories this year, we were very fortunate. We did identify through our Dock Watch program cyanobacteria at 19 of 20 docks, and you can see where they're located around the lake. The collected data through the Dock Watch program is not only being used locally, but is uploaded to a national database tracking cyanobacteria dynamics around the country. Over 40 volunteers are super engaged in this micro-stewardship approach to monitoring. The questions about the watershed conditions, though, are numerous. We engaged Princeton Hydro, a professional lake management firm, to help us design and execute a study about the conditions of the Blackwater River arm of the lake, which was the hardest hit in 2023. Primarily a desktop analysis, this type of study is a cost-effective way to assess causes of HABs in any lake. With this work, we not only got a head start on 2024, but we became an integral stakeholder in decision-making for the work now being conducted on the full lake watershed by Virginia Tech. The results of the Blackwater study tasks were not necessarily a surprise. The historic data has shown that the watershed is the main source of nutrients into the lake. Through an analysis of land use types and modeling various factors of hydrology, watershed characteristics, and nutrient inputs, the results show that the type of land use, whether urban, forest, agriculture, or residential, does drive nutrient loads at different but at predictable levels. Nutrient reduction, therefore, must be the first tool in our toolbox at Smith Mountain Lake to improve watershed conditions. Projects that could be installed can all contribute to reducing the load of nutrients, but there is no single silver bullet. And of course, all of these take funding to implement. I would like to now take a brief moment to update you on the state study that was funded through the budget amendment last budget session. The team at the Virginia Tech Water Resources Research Center is leading this project, and I thank them very much for providing the following slides so that I could bring this update to you today. The collaborative goal of this study is to evaluate the conditions that led to the appearance of the 2023 HABs at Smith Mountain Lake, as well as to determine whether harmful algal blooms will become a regular occurrence, if they'll stick around for a long time, and across how much of the lake we might see them. Major factors leading to the development of harmful algal blooms in the lake will be assessed through data analysis, remote sensing, land use assessment, and a deeper, more detailed modeling effort than was conducted on the Blackwater Arm. And from the information gathered and the output of the modeling, general management approaches will be provided by the team to prevent and/or mitigate future harmful algal blooms. The study team was assembled by the middle of September this year when the DEQ established a contract with the Virginia Tech Water Resource Research Center. Four researchers are leading the greater team, which meets every 2 weeks virtually, and they were able to meet in person to take a tour of the lake in October. An advisory committee of watershed and lake experts has been formed to guide the efforts of the team, and they met as recently as November 19th. And this project should be complete by May of 2025. The immediate tasks underway right now include data collection from the DEQ, from Ferrum College, from the SMLA, and from VDH, summary of the past algal bloom data, initiation of some remote sensing work, land use analysis, and watershed modeling efforts. I would urge you, if you have more questions about the state study that's underway now, you reach out to the Virginia Tech Water Resource Research Center for additional details about the project. We're very excited that they've gotten underway, and we're going to have some very dovetail information along with our Blackwater River project. So these preceding slides provide a brief update for the research and planning initiatives underway at both Lake Anna and Smith Mountain Lake. And today we're also here to ask you for more help for all the Commonwealth inland waterways that our citizens and visitors enjoy for recreation, vacation, and significant economic pursuits. You probably know that when a harmful algal bloom report comes from a citizen or a water quality monitor, DEQ scrambles to respond. Technicians deploy their boats, they collect their samples, and the samples are sent to a certified laboratory for analysis, and then we wait for results. This wait can and has been as long as 2 weeks, and once the results are in, the Virginia Department of Health compares them to the criteria that defines a true harmful algal bloom. Swimming advisories, if warranted, are then triggered. Either an elevated concentration of cyanobacteria or elevated toxins above advisory levels define if a bloom is considered to be harmful. Both analyses require skilled technicians and equipment to properly process samples. That delay of up to 2 weeks, meanwhile, could mean that the public is exposed to potential toxins or that the bloom has resolved itself. And in most cases, that's generally what's happened. And the process and delay, as Harry mentioned, is repeated to clear a swimming advisory for at least 2 more sampling periods. So it was very surprising then to learn that no specific funding exists for the DEQ to respond and analyze these samples for inland lakes and rivers. Without appropriate sustained funding, reliable, timely, and protective harmful algal bloom sampling and testing is limited at best, and at worst exposes swimmers, livestock, and pets to unknown toxin risks. Harry and I are both here today on behalf of all inland recreational waters that are or could be affected by harmful algal blooms. We are asking for your support of our request to the General Assembly for a budget amendment in the amount of $250,000 to fund the DEQ for the next year of inland waterway response for harmful algal blooms. Of course, please note that a sustained and permanent appropriation will be needed to continue this support by the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality for the benefit of all recreational users of the waters of the Commonwealth. So with that, I'm just going to wrap it up. If you have any questions, I thank you very much for your time today, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm glad there weren't any algae blooms when I used to swim in the lake when I was a kid.
Explain some stuff.
Yeah, maybe that's why I'm like I am.
Something affected you.
Yeah, okay. Any questions, comments, motions?
I move that we adopt the suggestion of DEQ funding of $250,000.
I think you're endorsing, let me make sure it's, you want to endorse the idea, we endorse a budget amendment,
Endorsing.
250, the commission endorsed the concept of $250,000 budget amendment to DEQ to fund the collection of HAB samples and analysis for cell counts and toxicology for all inland waterways. That's what you would endorse. So we're going to endorse spending money we have no control over here on this commission. We have been for the last 2 hours.
It's coming from Senator Sturba.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I love Smith Mountain Lake. Lake Anna, I got to go visit. Is there a second to that idea? Second. Is there any discussion about that? You know, to look closer at these inland waterways that produce a lot of economic benefit to our state. Yeah, Krizek.
I would just ask if do we have confirmation from them that would speed this process up so it wouldn't take 7 days?
Yes, it's my understanding that the way the samples are currently analyzed, they have to go to an outside laboratory, and this way they could be done internally.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
Aye.
No. Okay, thanks, Senator Marsden. Just because we endorsed it doesn't mean you don't have to work the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got it. All right, one more presentation. We have City of Richmond here to talk about the largest combined sewer in the state of Virginia and their efforts to reduce raw sewage discharges. Big problem, very expensive problem, and welcome to the commission.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Yep.
My name is April Bingham. Are we ready to start?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is April Bingham, and I serve as the Senior Director for the City of Richmond's Department of Public Utilities. Here with me, behind me, I have 2 of my colleagues, as well as many others in the room, that have come today to support the city on this particular project of this important work. At DPU, our mission is to provide safe and reliable utility service for the Richmond area and parts of our surrounding counties. On behalf of the City of Richmond, I would like to thank you today for your time and consideration on this important topic. We're grateful for the funds you have already appropriated supporting this particular CSO program. The CSO Control Program is a generational infrastructure investment that is fast-tracking the city's decade-long efforts to improve water quality by reducing combined wastewater and stormwater overflows into our shared waterways. This work protects the James River, a waterway that has anchored the economic growth and revitalization of the capital of our Commonwealth. We prepared a quick presentation for you today to discuss specific details about the work being done and led by DPU. And in today's presentation, we're hopeful that we can cover details that demonstrate the city's commitment to further improving water quality. We'll also use this opportunity to highlight the critical milestones about the process, which includes our partnership with DEQ through the interim and final plan submissions, as well as our need to secure funding to meet the requirements of Senate Bill 1064.
Ms. Bingham, I have one quick question. How much money has the state already allocated of state funds towards this? Do you know? Roughly.
Altogether historically, or just for current phase?
To fix the CSO problem. Just out of curiosity, I'm curious how much the state's already invested.
Probably on the order of about $100 million. We've got $50 million that was appropriated for FY25 in last year's general, or this year's general assembly.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that question. So here's a brief overview of the agenda that we will cover today. Going right into the presentation, the wastewater utility provides wastewater collection and treatment for approximately 64,000 customers in the city of Richmond, as well as small portions of Chesterfield and Henrico counties. In addition, the city provides wholesale service to Goochland County. The collection system consists of both a sanitary sewer and a combined sewer system. About 1/3 of the city is served by a legacy combined sewer system that is over 150 years old. Within this system, DPU manages the following, as you see on the slide: 8 wastewater pumping stations, 25 sewer outfalls, 140 million gallon per day wastewater treatment plant, and over 1,000 miles of sewers and interceptors and mains. Like many other historical cities in the United States, Richmond has a combined sewer system that transports both wastewater and stormwater. Combined sewer systems, which carry the acronym of CSO, was considered to be state-of-the-art in the 1800s. As illustrated by this slide, during dry weather, on the left-hand side, all of the wastewater flows to the Richmond's wastewater treatment plant. During wet weather, on the right-hand side, the combination of wastewater and stormwater can exceed the capacity of the pipes at the plant, causing an overflow of untreated combined sewer into our waterways, and that is our challenge.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Doug Krizak.
If I could ask a quick question regarding that. It's not all wet weather occurrences, I would imagine. How many times a year does it happen, on average, where it does overflow?
So in Alexandria, they used to say it was like if they got more than 1/10 of an inch of rain, it would cause an overflow. In Alexandria, I don't know about Richmond, but yeah, maybe.
It varies from outfall to outfall. Some are controlled to fewer than 4 overflows a year. Others are perhaps on the most active, maybe 40-ish events a year. So.
Okay, as a friendly reminder, Richmond has been working for decades to improve the water quality in the James River. This slide walks us through some of the progress that we've made over the years, and it highlights some project photos as well. Phase 1, over 40 years ago, the city initiated 2 major water quality improvement projects. One of them was the 50 million gallon Chaco retention basin that sits along I-95, and the other one was improvements to our wastewater treatment plant. These projects together significantly improve the city's ability to capture and treat combined sewage and reduce the volume of combined sewer overflows. And then in phase 2, which was the second phase of our water quality projects, they included the improvements to conveyance and storage capacity of the system itself. Most notably, in 2003, the Hampton-McCloy Storage Tunnel was placed into operation. The tunnel allows the city to capture and store 7 million gallons of combined sewer, which is subsequently conveyed to the wastewater treatment plant once the plant has the capacity to accept the flow. Phase 3, as part of the 2005 Special Order of Consent issued by the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, the city implemented wet weather flow improvements at the wastewater treatment plant, increasing the capacity from 75 million gallons a day to 140 million gallons per day. In response to Senate Bill 1064, approved by the General Assembly in 2020, the city has worked with DEQ to develop the interim and final plans. This includes 14 water quality projects that will further reduce combined sewer overflows through a combination of storage, treatment, sewer, and sewer separation. The interim plan was approved by DEQ in 2021 and is on track for completion by July 1 of 2027. The final plan is the essential component of the legislation. It was approved by DEQ and was developed in close coordination with DEQ and other public stakeholder groups. 20 alternatives were evaluated to identify the most beneficial and cost-effective solutions. Each of these alternatives were assessed for performance, costs, qualitative factors, schedule, and cost-effectiveness, resulting in the selection of 4 final plans. This collaborative effort resulted in a quick 8-week turnaround from DEQ, and we're appreciative for that partnership. The city has worked hard over the past 2 years to refine the alternatives recently discussed. The cost of this particular project was coming in at $1.3 billion. This process we employed allowed us to significantly reduce the cost of the selected plan to $575 million, while we're ensuring compliance for the General Assembly's requirements. This is nearly a 50% reduction to our cost of our ratepayers. This is a good news story, and I applaud the efforts of DPU for leading this effort for our great city. We will discuss later in the presentation the considerations for our ratepayers from an affordability perspective. The interim plan projects are on track to be completed. The construction is on track to be completed by July 1, 2027 deadline. This is also more good news. All of the interim plan projects and 2 of the final plan projects are funded through ARPA. Once again, this is more good news. However, funding has not been secured for the remaining 2 final plan projects. Richmond's wastewater rates are already among the highest in the Commonwealth due to significant past investments in CSO controls. As shown on the left, Richmond's median household income is substantially below the state average, while on the right side, you can see that Richmond's wastewater utility bill, expressed as a percentage of median household income, is higher than the statewide average and approaching the affordability threshold as defined by EPA. The city explored the impact of additional costs on lower income levels as the median household income fails to represent those who are living in poverty or likely classified as the working poor. This impact can be represented by EPA's lowest quintile residential indicator, which for Richmond are households' incomes that are below $21,000. As shown on the map to the left in the red area, 59% of residential customers reside in a census tract designated as high impact with an average customer bill over 2% of the lowest quintile income. As illustrated by this slide, the city will need $500 million in state grant funds set aside by fiscal year 2029 to initiate contracts to comply with the deadline set by the General Assembly for Senate Bill 1064. To fund the remaining 2 large final plan projects, the city is requesting $100 million to $150 million each year from FY 2025 through FY 2028 for a total of $500 million in grant funds set aside to move forward with construction for these important projects that drive water quality initiatives. And that concludes our brief presentation. On the screen, you've already heard his voice a couple of times, but Bob Stone is serving as our Deputy Director for the CSO program, and I also have with me today Billy Vaughn, who is our Deputy Director of Finance. And at this time, we would like to open up the floor for any questions that you may have.
So thank you for that. Ever since we tackled the Alexandria CSO a few years ago, the Richmond one was sort of the next one on the agenda. I know Senator Stewart's bill, which is what you're talking about, sorry, he left a minute ago, is what's driving a lot of this. So once this is done, this, I guess, additional $1 billion is spent, how much will the problem be reduced to? I know, for example, in Alexandria, they're not eliminating 100%. They're eliminating like 98% of discharges or something like that. What would this get to?
So we believe, and Bob Stone can keep me honest here, but there's about 90% that we still need to address. So it's all stormwater, right? So we believe that this will cut us down to about 85% of the 90% that we're trying to take care of.
Okay. Okay. Any idea how that translates into gallons? I thought I heard one year that like you guys put out something like 1 billion gallons a year of raw sewage on average, although it changes depending on how bad the rain is each year or whatever. I remember Alexandria is like 120 million gallons a year.
Ours varies with the weather. It's not all raw sewage. You know, I guess the combined sewer is probably 90% stormwater, 10% wastewater. Just get that on the record.
I remember when Senator Evans said that to Senator Stewart when we were hearing my bill, and Senator Stewart said, if you take 10 million gallons of raw sewage and put 100 million gallons of water with it, you get 110 million gallons of raw sewage. But
we've got a much larger system than Alexandria. Depending on the weather, the first part of 2024, well, December through February was the wettest 3-month winter period on record this past year. A good year, Richmond is probably around 1 billion gallons of overflow volume. In a bad year, it might be 2 to 3 million or 1 billion gallons of overflow volume.
Yeah,
I think this program would reduce that to somewhere on the 200 million per year average. But the modeling would shows that we would meet state water quality standards for bacteria after this program is completed.
So right now,
relatively close now, but
roughly on average, how many days a year do you have to tell people, "Hey, look out"? And how would this change that? Any idea? Looking at it that way,
this would probably reduce it to somewhere on the 2 to 6 realm.
2 to 6
versus
days a year?
maybe
2 to 6 days a year.
Days per year.
Yeah. Okay. Bull, have you had a question?
Or rain events per year.
No, but Mr. Chairman, that was my question. Which is, how would the effort translate? You had mentioned overflows, I think, 40 times a year with particular outfalls, and was interested in from a practical standpoint, what would that be? What would this reduce that down to?
I think it's 96% of the overflows.
Somewhere on that vicinity. Right now, we've got the Chaco outfall is by far our largest. It constitutes 80+% of our annual overflow volume. Drains a very large watershed in the northern part of the city of Richmond, as well as, I guess, picks up Chaco Creek, which flows out into Henrico County as well. Okay. That's the large project that really needs to get done to make a large impact on water quality in the river.
Any questions? Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And looking at this and, the dollars that are needed, $500 million by 2029? And as far as those dollars, are you going to need all of that money? When are you going to need it? And, how does that come into play to put all this into place?
Why you need the 29?
Okay. The goal of having the money set aside by 2029 is around that time we need to go out and award large construction contracts. We need to have the money the funding identified and guaranteed at that point. Does that answer your question? Or
I mean, I understand that, but I mean, that's.
our desire is to have the state identify the grant fundings incrementally in the next 4 or 5 fiscal years and set the money aside in the Virginia CSO matching fund where the state still has control of that funds. And then when we award contracts, we'll execute the grant agreement and we get reimbursed as we actually spend money and pay contractors. We submit to DEQ and get reimbursed after the fact.
Okay, thank you.
How much did the state fund of Alexandria's, do you know what percentage we funded of Alexandria's project?
Kelvin, yeah.
Originally, it was going to be very little, and then it seemed to grow and grow and grow through the pandemic. So Senator Ebbins' influence increased.
Yeah, I believe it was 140 million total for grants, and they still used a portion of the revolving loan fund as well for a portion of the project. I believe they also got, for the River Renew, they have 321 million from EPA. And so if you look at the state grants, about 140 million, revolving loan, I believe it was 185 million.
So out of the total project cost of
646 million, roughly.
The state paid about half?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is about the same? Okay. All right, Delegate Krizak, you had something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I'm just looking at slide 10, the interim and final plan project schedules. So the ARPA-funded projects are the majority of them. I assume that that's not fully funded either. Or is it that just the Canoe Run Park Storage Tank and the Shocker Retention Basin are the ones that would be necessary to go to that next, to be able to use that 500 million?
Yeah, the 10 interim plan projects as well as the first 2 final plan projects are fully funded with ARPA dollars from the feds through the state. So it's just those remaining 2 which together are roughly 500 million.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
So you are currently everything you're working on. I mean, it's not waiting for the funds, I guess is really the question. So the reason you have this 2029 schedule to be able to have that money released is because that would be then the time you'd be able to put your resources towards doing those 2. If we had 500 million for you tomorrow, you still would want to wait. Is that correct?
Correct. We still have to procure design services, which will be letting those solicitations right after the first of the year. These are large projects. They'll take probably 3 years to design and permit before we're ready to bid for construction.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this?
It's very hard to hit.
Multi-billion-dollar program. Nope. Okay. Thank you for that. We look forward to the progress you guys are going to make on that. It's a huge project and on the biggest river in the state, and we definitely need. It's good to see we're making progress on it finally. Okay. Do we have any public comment? Anybody online have any public comment?
If you're online and you wish to speak, please raise your hand electronically.
Doesn't look like it, huh? Nope. Okay, great. Well, folks, I think that's our final meeting for the year. Thank you for all your work this year. I think we got a lot of good things done. Glad we got quorum today, so we can take some votes. And we will be adjourned.
The Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.